And I was thinking about it, as I'm sure many of you were, different moments over the last number of months. I was wondering what was going to happen if, chas v'shalom, it happened, that there was a major outbreak in Gaza. And what would happen if they needed 1,000 ventilators? Would we distribute it evenly? I am compelled by the idea that all human beings are created in the image of God. Nobody's life, nobody's father or mother is better than someone else's. Nobody could claim that I'm superior to another. And that in our tradition, life transcends the tradition itself. But what happens if somebody's not behaving appropriately? What happens if somebody is not taking care? And now they're going to come and claim the same respirator that I might need. And I'm being careful, but they're not. Does human behavior in any way impact my responsibility to them? I know I started to feel this, and my sins I confess here today. I started to wonder, what are my responsibilities to the Haredi community? 70% of the people on the ventilators came from 10% of society. Is that fair? Were they acting responsibly? Does my responsibility to life, do they claim me to the same degree? And the reason why it's so important is that when life's fine and everything is going, I don't even think about it. But it's precisely when I'm broken. It's precisely when I'm frightened. Now your values are really tested.
Ashkenazi Jews, like you said, are deemed white by outside standards. Like there is a whiteness that gets applied, right? And then there's also this container that we as a Jewish community also sort of bring that in and create spaces that we perpetuate this in our own institutions. I think the first step is recognizing that you can believe, like you said, what you believe about your own self and your own identity, and it almost doesn't matter in some ways because the outside world sees you as this, and because the outside world sees you as this, there is some privilege, there is some conditional influence and power that particularly white Jews have in this country in this moment that they're afforded whether or not they see themselves as white or not. And I think really the first step is just understanding that and sitting with the discomfort of the fact that you have had that applied to you and that you also exist within this container. And it's not easy at all. And I think that is the number one important thing that we can do to begin really the healing and the work of building the society where we can all do what we need to do to be.
What I want to suggest to you is that there's 8 really essential characteristics of essential space. And when we think about whether a virtual space is useful in conveying holiness, is useful in creating prayer communities, for example, we should think, how does it rate against these metrics? So what I want to do with you is kind of go through what I imagine these 8 different characteristics to be, so that you, when you are in your next virtual space, can evaluate that space and think, does this actually match up? Is it possible for it to ever match up? Or is this virtual space actually just never going to meet the real characteristics of physical space that allow me to have a sense of holiness? So there's a bunch of sources, but before we get to the sources, the first source is actually Zoom itself. So thinking about Zoom itself, I want you to just pause for a second and ask yourself this question. Where are you right now? Like right this second. And I think the answer for many of us to that question is, it's kind of complicated. I am at home, I am in my home city, I'm also online, I'm wherever David Zvi is talking, I'm in the various homes, the various rooms where all the occupants of this call are sitting. But to some degree, the answer is kind of nowhere.
I want to talk with you and I want to think with you about how our relationships, that is people, groups, affiliations that we have that are important to us and have emotional resonance for us, how those affect our sense of truth. And what I mean by that is our moral values, our opinions about things, what we think is right and what we think is real. And not only do I want to examine how our relationships impact what we think is true, I also want to think about how what we think is true and what we believe is right and our opinions and our moral values are impacting our relationships.
When you talk about the fabric of creating a society, there is a new society that is being created. It's not that Jewish society is separate from the Arab society. It's a Jewish and Arab societies learning how to interact with each other on the concept of maybe it's interdependency, maybe it's mutual need, maybe it's mutual interest, but it's beyond the traditional identity politics that manages usually Jewish-Arab relations. We're going through a stage of interdependency based on maybe human interest, maybe on health interest right now. But I think the real life is teaching us that there are needs that are beyond the political disputes that we have on the issues such as the nation-state law, the identity of the state, the national anthem, flag, and things like that. We're beginning to learn how to live together.